2 Samuel 2:22 through 26 is where we'll be. And Abner said again to Ashel, Turn thee aside from following me, wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold my face to Joab thy brother? So we see in the earlier verses he knew he was, how Ashel caught up to Abner after chasing after him. And now he's just saying, let me go. And sometimes pursuing what we're supposed to is going to lead us to persecution as Christians. We're supposed to share the gospel. Sometimes people die doing that. What is God's will? It was God's will for David to be king, not Saul's son who, let's see, Ishbosheth, I believe. But yeah, it was God's plan. God had Samuel anoint David. So David was to be king. So it was God's will for David's army to win out. And that doesn't mean there wasn't going to be people persecuted and killed along the way, people injured. And God's will for us is to share His word, to share the gospel. That doesn't mean people ain't going to be killed for it and we ain't going to be persecuted. We're just to chase after doing His will. Howbeit he refused to turn aside. Wherefore Abner with the hinder end of the spear smote him under the fifth rib, and the spear came out behind, and he fell down there and died in the same place. And came to pass that as many came to the place where Ashel fell down and died stood still. I think, from what I understand, the place where he stabbed him, it would have been a quick death. It wouldn't have been something where it would have been somewhere where he died pretty quickly. Because it would have hit some major organs and it still would have been painful and he would have bled a lot, but it would have been quick. His heart would have stopped beating a lot quicker. Abner would have stabbed him in a leg or something bad where he could just bled out and not move that way. And tactics of war, that type of thing was done, to where the enemy would be wounded, not being able to move, and just bleed out and die, and end up sometimes get infection, and that get them instead of the wound itself. And at this time dying to infection was probably something that was a common occurrence. But Abner does this because he's familiar with the family. You know, as Christians, those who are closest to us, oftentimes, and are not Christian, oftentimes are the ones who least likely want to hear us preach and share the gospel with them. You know, we see in the gospel how Jesus was received by so many people, but until he came back from the grave, his family rejected him for who he was. So we see a little closeness here, and Abner taking pity because of that. You know, while Abner wasn't in God's will, we can relate that God does show mercy on us. Sometimes we fall into something, but God gave us warnings. Well, if you keep going this way, before we actually fall into something and something horrible happens. And Him letting us know, hey, you don't want to do that, is a sign of mercy. The fact that He tells us in Scripture the things we're not supposed to do, and reminds and over in Scripture again, is mercy, to show that we shouldn't be living that way. Joab also and Asahel pursued after Abner, and the sun went down when they were come to the hill of Ammah that lieth before Giah by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. Now, it's important to note, most battles would stop once the sun set because they couldn't see. We see in the Old Testament, they'd light torches sometimes, being led by God, they'd light torches to battle so they could see. But oftentimes because of this, because half the people's holding torches. So it's not as equipped to battle, because to get light to see the battle, half your men are cut down so you could see. So it's much more practical to fight during the day, so oftentimes they just cease at night. And the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together after Abner and became one group and stood on the top of a hill. So we see how the battle ain't ended here. We as Christians, even during when the world is darkest, we're still to go out. It ain't no reason for us to turn aside. Well, things are too bad now. They ain't no. No, we're still to follow God's call. We're still to do what He says. But in doing what He says, sometimes in the darkest times means the most. We oftentimes see revival only when things are darkest. We see complacency and everybody just not real. More of a complacency rather than passion for the Lord during times are going good, and it's more of a cultural acceptance to serve the Lord. You become complacent, but in times where it's not accepted and it's struggle, you really have to have a passion for Him, because everything else is going to try to drive you away, and through that we develop a closeness to Him. And through us having that closeness to Him, people are going to be affected by it. Even those who don't have Him may see where He's bringing us from, what He's doing. Then Abner called to Joab and said, "Shall the sword devour forever? Knowest thou not that it will be bitterness in the latter end? How long will it be there ere thou bid the people return from following their brethren?" So what it is Saul and Abner, and this family's from the tribe of Benjamin. So he's having his family stick with him throughout this. Although God isn't with the kingdom of Saul anymore. Even when Saul was king, certain point, we see how God was with David, because we see him blessing through his soldier, being a soldier, and how everything David was involved in, God would just bless. That's because God left. Saul was no longer following God. Saul sinned against God and just kept following in that sin. So this family seeing, well, one of ours is meant to be king, is the way they're looking at it. So they're taking up, while majority of other people are going and realizing David as king. Because we see a lot of, the fact is it's mentioned only Benjamin following after with Abner and Judah following with Saul, but Judah following with David. We also know there's other tribes. So we see a lot of people maybe not even deciding where they're going to go, see who they're going to have as king yet at this time. And while they may be, we got an election coming up, whichever side people are on don't matter. We should always consider and pray to the Lord no matter what. We should always seek to Him. The answer ain't going to be in politics. The answer ain't going to be anything of this world. They might make things a little better. They could make things worse. But ultimately, through God is how things are going to be good. And that's who we need to look to. And if these men from Benjamin were looking at what God did, they would realize that they were fighting a losing battle. And oftentimes we fall into a place where we fight a losing battle because of what we think and what we want. Instead of seeking God, we follow our desires and passions, and they always bring us to a losing end and have us surrendering to the Lord anyway. So we should be more prone to seek His will and to follow in it.